Judges chapter 5. After the battle was over that day, Deborah and Barak sang this song.
We praise you, Lord. Our soldiers volunteered, ready to follow you. Listen, kings and rulers, while I sing for the Lord, the God of Israel. Our Lord God of Israel, when you came from Seir, where the Edomites live, rain poured from the sky, the earth trembled and mountains shook.
In the time of Shamgar, son of Anath, and now again in Jael's time, roads were too dangerous for caravans. Travelers had to take the back roads, and villagers couldn't work in their fields. Then Deborah took command, protecting Israel as a mother protects her children.
The Israelites worshipped other gods, and the gates of their towns were then attacked. But they had no shields or spears to fight with. I praise you, Lord, and I am grateful for those leaders and soldiers who volunteered. Listen, everyone, whether you ride a donkey with a padded saddle or have to walk, even those who carry water to the animals will tell you, the Lord has won victories, and so has Israel.
Then the Lord's people marched down to the town gates and said, Deborah, let's go. Let's sing as we march. Barak, capture our enemies. The Lord's people who were left joined with their leaders and fought at my side. Troops came from Ephraim, where Amalekites once lived. Others came from Benjamin. Officers and leaders came from Machir and Zebulun. The rulers of Issachar came along with Deborah, and Issachar joined Barak into the valley.
But the tribe of Reuben was no help at all. Reuben, why did you stay among your sheep pens? Was it to listen to shepherds whistling for their sheep? No one could figure out why Reuben wouldn't come. The people of Gilead stayed across the Jordan. Why did the tribe of Dan remain on their ships and the tribe of Asher stay along the coast near the harbors?
But soldiers of Zebulun and Naphtali risked their lives to attack the enemy. Canaanite kings fought us at Taanach by the stream near Megiddo, but they couldn't rob us of our silver. From their pathways in the sky, the stars fought Sisera, and his soldiers were swept away by the ancient Kishon River. I will march on and be brave. Sisera's horses galloped off, their hoofs thundering in retreat. The Lord's angel said, Put a curse on Meroz town. Its people refuse to help the Lord fight his powerful enemies.
But honor Jael, the wife of Heber from the Kenite clan. Give more honor to her than to any other woman who lives in tents. Yes, give more honor to her than to any other woman.
Sisera asked for water, but Jael gave him milk. Cream in a fancy cup. She reached for a tent peg and held a hammer in her right hand, and with a blow to the head she crushed his skull. Sisera sank to his knees and fell dead at her feet.
Sisera's mother looked out through her window. Why is he taking so long, she asked. Why haven't we heard his chariots coming? She and her wisest women gave the same answer. Sisera and his troops are finding treasures to bring back, a woman or maybe two for each man, and beautiful dresses for those women to wear. Our Lord, we pray that all your enemies will die like Sisera, but let everyone who loves you shine brightly like the sun at dawn.
Judges chapter 6. There was peace in Israel for about 40 years. Then once again the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, so he let the nation of Midian control Israel for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that many Israelites ran to the mountains and hid in caves. Every time the Israelites would plant crops, the Midianites invaded Israel together with the Amalekites and other eastern nations. They rode in on their camels, set up their tents, and then let their livestock eat the crops as far as the town of Gaza. The Midianites stole food, sheep, cattle, and donkeys. Like a swarm of locusts, they could not be counted, and they ruined the land wherever they went. The Midianites took almost everything that belonged to the Israelites, and the Israelites begged the Lord for help. Then the Lord sent a prophet to them with this message.
I am the Lord God of Israel, so listen to what I say. You were slaves in Egypt, but I set you free and led you out of Egypt into this land. And when nations here made life miserable for you, I rescued you and helped you get rid of them and take their land. I am your God, and I told you not to worship Amorite gods, even though you are living in the land of the Amorites. But you refused to listen.
One day an angel from the Lord went to the town of Ophrah and sat down under the big tree that belonged to Joash, a member of the Abiezer clan. Joash's son Gideon was nearby, threshing grain in a shallow pit where he could not be seen by the Midianites. The angel appeared and spoke to Gideon.
The Lord is helping you, and you are a strong warrior.
Gideon answered,
Please, don't take this wrong, but if the Lord is helping us, then why have all these awful things happened? We've heard how the Lord performed miracles and rescued our ancestors from Egypt. But those things happened long ago. Now the Lord has abandoned us to the Midianites.
Then the Lord himself said,
Gideon, you will be strong, because I am giving you the power to rescue Israel from the Midianites.
Gideon replied,
But how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest one in Manasseh, and everyone else in my family is more important than I am.
Gideon,
the Lord answered,
you can rescue Israel because I am going to help you. Defeating the Midianites will be as easy as beating up one man.
Gideon said,
It's hard to believe that I'm actually talking to the Lord. Please, do something so I'll know that you really are the Lord. And wait here until I bring you an offering.
All right, I'll wait,
the Lord answered. Gideon went home and killed a young goat, then started boiling the meat. Next, he opened a big sack of flour and made it into thin bread. When the meat was done, he put it in a basket and poured the broth into a clay cooking pot. He took the meat, the broth, and the bread and placed them under the big tree. God's angel said,
Gideon, put the meat and the bread on this rock and pour the broth over them.
Gideon did as he was told. The angel was holding a walking stick, and he touched the meat and the bread with the end of the stick. Flames jumped from the rock and burned up the meat and the bread. When Gideon looked, the angel was gone. Gideon realized that he had seen one of the Lord's angels.
Oh,
he moaned.
No, I'm going to die.
Calm down,
the Lord told Gideon.
There is nothing to be afraid of. You are not going to die.
Gideon built an altar for worshiping the Lord and called it The Lord Calms Our Fears. It still stands there in Ophrah, a town in the territory of the Abiezer clan. That night, the Lord spoke to Gideon again.
Get your father's second-best bull, the one that's 7 years old. Use it to pull down the altar where your father worships Baal and cut down the sacred pole next to the altar. Then build an altar for worshipping me on the highest part of the hill where your town is built. Use layers of stone for my altar, not just a pile of rocks. Cut up the wood from the pole, make a fire, kill the bull, and burn it as a sacrifice to me.
Gideon chose 10 of his servants to help him, and they did everything God had said. But since Gideon was afraid of his family and the other people in town, he did it all at night. When the people of the town got up the next morning, they saw that Baal's altar had been knocked over, and the sacred pole next to it had been cut down. Then they noticed the new altar, covered with the remains of the sacrificed bull.
Who could have done such a thing?
They asked. And they kept on asking until finally someone told them,
Gideon, the son of Joash, did it.
The men of the town went to Joash and said,
Your son Gideon knocked over Baal's altar and cut down the sacred pole next to it. Hand him over so we can kill him.
The crowd pushed closer and closer, but Joash replied,
Are you trying to take revenge for Baal? Are you trying to rescue Baal? If you are, you will be the ones who are put to death, and it will happen before another day dawns. If Baal really is a god, let him take his own revenge on someone who tears down his altar.
That same day, Joash changed Gideon's name to Jerubbaal, explaining,
He tore down Baal's altar, so let Baal take revenge himself.
All the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern nations got together and crossed the Jordan River. Then they invaded the land of Israel and set up camp in Jezreel Valley. The Lord's Spirit took control of Gideon, and Gideon blew a signal on a trumpet to tell the men in the Abiezer clan to follow him. He also sent messengers to the tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, telling the men of these tribes to come and join his army. Then they set out toward the enemy camp. Gideon prayed to God.
I know that you promised to help me rescue Israel, but I need proof. Tonight I'll put some wool on the stone floor of that threshing floor over there. If you really will help me rescue Israel, then tomorrow morning let there be dew on the wool, but let the stone floor be dry.
And that's just what happened. Early the next morning, Gideon got up and checked the wool. He squeezed out enough water to fill a bowl. But Gideon prayed to God again.
Don't be angry at me,
Gideon said.
Let me try this just one more time, so I'll really be sure you'll help me. Only this time, let the wool be dry and the stone floor be wet with dew.
That night, God made the stone floor wet with dew, but he kept the wool dry. Judges chapter 7. Early the next morning, Gideon and his army got up and moved their camp to Fear Spring. The Midianite camp was to the north, in the valley at the foot of Morah Hill. The Lord said,
Gideon, your army is too big. I can't let you win with this many soldiers. The Israelites would think that they had won the battle all by themselves, and that I didn't have anything to do with it. So call your troops together and tell them that anyone who is really afraid can leave Mount Gilead and go home.
22,000 men returned home, leaving Gideon with only 10,000 soldiers.
Gideon,
the Lord said,
you still have too many soldiers. Take them down to the spring and I'll test them. I'll tell you which ones can go along with you and which ones must go back home.
When Gideon led his army down to the spring, the Lord told him,
watch how each man gets a drink of water. Then divide them into two groups, those who lap the water like a dog and those who kneel down to drink.
300 men scooped up water in their hands and lapped it, and the rest knelt to get a drink. The Lord said,
Gideon, your army will be made up of everyone who lapped the water from their hands. Send the others home. I'm going to rescue Israel by helping you and your army of 300 defeat the Midianites.
Then Gideon gave these orders.
You 300 men stay here. The rest of you may go home, but leave your food and trumpets with us.
Gideon's army camp was on top of a hill overlooking the Midianite camp in the valley. That night, the Lord said to Gideon,
get up, attack the Midianite camp. I am going to let you defeat them. But if you're still afraid, you and your servant Purah should sneak down to their camp. When you hear what the Midianites are saying, you'll be brave enough to attack.
Gideon and Purah worked their way to the edge of the enemy camp, where soldiers were on guard duty. The camp was huge. The Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern nations covered the valley like a swarm of locusts, and it would be easier to count the grains of sand on a beach than to count their camels. Gideon overheard one enemy guard telling another,
I had a dream about a flat loaf of barley bread that came tumbling into our camp. It hit the headquarters tent, and the tent flipped over and fell down.
The other soldier answered,
your dream must have been about Gideon, the Israelite commander. It means God will let him and his army defeat the Midianite army and everyone else in our camp.
As soon as Gideon heard about the dream and what it meant, he bowed down to praise God. Then he went back to the Israelite camp and shouted,
let's go! The Lord is going to let us defeat the Midianite army!
Gideon divided his little army into 3 groups of 100 men, and he gave each soldier a trumpet and a large clay jar with a burning torch inside. Gideon said,
when we get to the enemy camp, spread out and surround it. Then wait for me to blow a signal on my trumpet. As soon as you hear it, blow your trumpets and shout, 'Fight for the Lord! Fight for Gideon!'"
Gideon and his group reached the edge of the enemy camp a few hours after dark, just after the new guards had come on duty. Gideon and his soldiers blew their trumpets and smashed the clay jars that were hiding the torches. The rest of Gideon's soldiers blew the trumpets they were holding in their right hands. Then they smashed the jars and held the burning torches in their left hands. Everyone shouted,
"Fight with your swords for the Lord and for Gideon!"
The enemy soldiers started yelling and tried to run away. Gideon's troops stayed in their positions, surrounding the camp, and blew their trumpets again. As they did, the Lord made the enemy soldiers pull out their swords and start fighting each other. The enemy army tried to escape from the camp. They ran to Acacia Tree Town, toward Zereda, and as far as the edge of the land that belonged to the town of Abel Meholah near Tabbath. Gideon sent word for more Israelite soldiers to come from the tribes of Naphtali, Asher, and both halves of Manasseh to help fight the Midianites. He also sent messengers to tell all the men who lived in the hill country of Ephraim,
"Come and help us fight the Midianites. Put guards at every spring, stream, and well as far as Beth-Bera before the Midianites can get to them. And guard the Jordan River."
Troops from Ephraim did exactly what Gideon had asked, and they even helped chase the Midianites on the east side of the Jordan River. These troops captured Raven and Wolf, the two Midianite leaders. They killed Raven at a large rock that has come to be known as Raven Rock, and they killed Wolf near a wine pit that has come to be called Wolf Wine Pit. The men of Ephraim brought the heads of the two Midianite leaders to Gideon. Judges chapter 8. But the men were really upset with Gideon and complained,
"When you went to war with Midian, you didn't ask us to help. Why did you treat us like that?"
Gideon answered,
"Don't be upset. Even though you came later, you were able to do much more than I did. It's just like the grape harvest. The grapes your tribe doesn't even bother to pick are better than the best grapes my family can grow. Besides, God chose you to capture Raven and Wolf. I didn't do a thing compared to you."
By the time Gideon had finished talking, the men of Ephraim had calmed down and were no longer angry at him. After Gideon and his 300 troops had chased the Midianites as far as the Jordan River, they were exhausted. The town of Succoth was nearby, so he went there and asked,
"Please give my troops some food. They are worn out, but we have to keep chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the two Midianite kings."
The town leaders of Succoth answered,
"Why should we feed your army? We don't know if you really will defeat Zebah and Zalmunna."
"Just wait,"
Gideon said.
"After the Lord helps me defeat them, I'm coming back here. I'll make a whip out of thorns and rip the flesh from your bones."
After leaving Succoth, Gideon went to Peniel and asked the leaders there for some food, but he got the same answer as he had gotten at Succoth.
"I'll come back safe and sound,"
Gideon said.
"But when I do, I'm gonna tear down your tower."
Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, with an army of 15,000 troops. They were all that was left of the army of the eastern nations, because 120,000 of their warriors had been killed in the battle. Gideon reached the enemy camp by going east along Nomad Road, past Nobah and Jogbehah. He made a surprise attack, and the enemy panicked. Zebah and Zalmunna tried to escape, but Gideon chased and captured them. After the battle, Gideon set out for home. As he was going through Hira's Pass, he caught a young man who lived in Succoth. Gideon asked him who the town officials of Succoth were, and the young man wrote down 77 names. Gideon went to the town officials and said,
"Here are Zebah and Zalmunna. Remember how you made fun of me? You said, 'We don't know if you really will defeat those two Midianite kings, so why should we feed your worn-out army?'"
Gideon made a whip from thorn plants and used it to beat the town officials. Afterwards, he went to Peniel, where he tore down the tower and killed all the town officials there. Then Gideon said,
"Zebah and Zalmunna, tell me about the men you killed at Tabor."
"They were a lot like you,"
the two kings answered.
"They were dignified, almost like royalty."
"They were my very own brothers,"
Gideon said.
I swear by the living Lord that if you had let them live, I would let you live.
Gideon turned to Jether, his oldest son.
Kill them,
Gideon said. But Jether was young, and he was too afraid to even pull out his sword.
What's the matter, Gideon?
Zebah and Zalmunna asked.
Do it yourself if you're not too much of a coward.
Gideon jumped up and killed them both. Then he took the fancy gold ornaments from the necks of their camels. After the battle with the Midianites, the Israelites said,
Gideon, you rescued us. Now we want you to be our king. Then after your death, your son and then your grandson will rule.
No,
Gideon replied.
I won't be your king, and my son won't be king either. Only the Lord is your ruler, but I will ask you to do one thing. Give me all the earrings you took from the enemy.
The enemy soldiers had been Ishmaelites, and they wore gold earrings. The Israelite soldiers replied,
Of course, we'll give you the earrings.
Then they spread out a robe on the ground and tossed the earrings on it. The total weight of this gold was over 40 pounds. In addition, there was gold from the camels' ornaments and from the beautiful jewelry worn by the Midianite kings. Gideon also took their purple robes. Gideon returned to his home in Ophrah and had the gold made into a statue, which the Israelites soon started worshiping. They became unfaithful to God, and even Gideon and his family were trapped into worshiping the statue. The Midianites had been defeated so badly that they were no longer strong enough to attack Israel, and so Israel was at peace for the remaining 40 years of Gideon's life. Gideon had many wives and 70 sons. He even had a wife who lived at Shechem. They had a son, and Gideon named him Abimelech. Gideon lived to be an old man, and when he died, he was buried in the family tomb in his hometown of Ophrah, which belonged to the Abiezer clan. Soon after Gideon's death, the Israelites turned their backs on God again. They set up idols of Baal and worshipped Baal-berith as their god. The Israelites forgot that the Lord was their God, and that he had rescued them from the enemies who lived around them. Besides all that, the Israelites were unkind to Gideon's family, even though Gideon had done so much for Israel. Judges, chapter 9. Abimelech, the son of Gideon, went to Shechem. While there, he met with his mother's relatives and told them to say to the leaders of Shechem,
Do you think it would be good to have all 70 of Gideon's sons ruling us? Wouldn't you rather have just one man be king? Abimelech would make a good king, and he's related to us.
Abimelech's uncles talked it over with the leaders of Shechem, who agreed.
Yes, it would be better for one of our relatives to be king.
Then they gave Abimelech 70 pieces of silver from the temple of their god Baal-berith. Abimelech used the silver to hire a gang of rough soldiers who would do anything for money. Abimelech and his soldiers went to his father's home in Ophrah and brought out Gideon's other sons to a large rock where they murdered all 70. Gideon's youngest son Jotham hid from the soldiers, but he was the only one who escaped. The leaders of Shechem, including the priests and the military officers, met at the tree next to the sacred rock in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. Jotham heard what they were doing, so he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted down to the people who were there at the meeting.
Leaders of Shechem, listen to me, and maybe God will listen to you. Once the trees searched for someone to be king. They asked the olive tree, will you be our king? But the olive tree replied, my oil brings honor to people and gods. I won't stop making oil just to have my branches wave above the other trees. Then they asked the fig tree, will you be our king? But the fig tree replied, I won't stop growing my delicious fruit just to have my branches wave above the other trees. Next they asked the grapevine, will you be our king? But the grapevine replied, my wine brings cheer to people and gods. I won't stop making wine just to have my branches wave above the other trees. Finally, they went to the thorn bush and asked, will you be our king? The thorn bush replied, If you really want me to be your king, then come into my shade and I will protect you. But if you're deceiving me, I'll start a fire that will spread out and destroy the cedars of Lebanon."
After Jotham had finished telling this story, he said,
"My father Gideon risked his life for you when he fought to rescue you from the Midianites. Did you reward Gideon by being kind to his family? No, you did not. You attacked his family and killed all 70 of his sons on that rock. And was it right to make Abimelech your king? He's merely the son of my father's slave girl. But just because he's your relative, you made him king of Shechem. So, you leaders of Shechem, if you treated Gideon and his family the way you should have, then I hope you and Abimelech will make each other very happy. But if it was wrong to treat Gideon and his family the way you did, then I pray that Abimelech will destroy you with fire, and I pray that you will do the same to him."
Jotham ran off and went to live in the town of Beer, where he could be safe from his brother Abimelech. Abimelech had been a military commander of Israel for 3 years when God decided to punish him and the leaders of Shechem for killing Gideon's 70 sons. So God turned the leaders of Shechem against Abimelech. Then they sent some men to hide on the hilltops and watch for Abimelech and his troops, while they sent others to rob everyone that went by on the road. But Abimelech found out what they were doing. One day, Gaal, son of Ebed, went to live in Shechem. His brothers moved there too, and soon the leaders of Shechem started trusting him. The time came for the grape harvest, and the people of Shechem went into their vineyards and picked the grapes. They put the grapes in their wine pits and walked on them to squeeze out the juice in order to make wine. Then they went into the temple of their god and threw a big party. There was a lot of eating and drinking, and before long they were cursing Abimelech. Gaal said,
"Hamer was the founder of Shechem, and one of his descendants should be our ruler. But Abimelech's father was Gideon, so Abimelech isn't really one of us. He shouldn't be our king, and we shouldn't have to obey him or Zebul, who rules Shechem for him. If I were the ruler of Shechem, I'd get rid of that Abimelech. I'd tell him, 'Get yourself an even bigger army, and we will still defeat you.'"
Zebul was angry when he found out what Gaal had said, and so he sent some messengers to Abimelech. But they had to pretend to be doing something else, or they would not have been allowed to leave Shechem. Zebul told the messengers to say,
"Gaal, the son of Ebed, has come to Shechem along with his brothers, and they have persuaded the people to let Gaal rule Shechem instead of you. This is what I think you should do. Lead your army here during the night and hide in the fields. Get up the next morning at sunrise and rush out of your hiding places to attack the town. Gaal and his followers will come out to fight you, but you will easily defeat them."
So one night, Abimelech led his soldiers to Shechem. He divided them into 4 groups, and they all hid near the town. The next morning, Gaal went out and stood in the opening of the town gate. Abimelech and his soldiers left their hiding places, and Gaal saw them. Zebul was standing there with Gaal, and Gaal remarked,
"Zebul, that looks like a crowd of people coming down from the mountaintops."
"No,"
Zebul answered.
"It's just the shadows of the mountains. It only looks like people moving."
"But Zebul, look over there,"
Gaal said.
"There's a crowd coming down from the sacred mountain, and another group is coming along the road from the tree where people talk with the spirits of the dead."
Then Zebul replied,
"What good is all your bragging now? You were the one who said Abimelech shouldn't be the ruler of Shechem. Out there is the army that you made fun of. So go out and fight them."
Gaal and the leaders of Shechem went out and fought Abimelech. Soon the people of Shechem turned and ran back into the town. However, Abimelech and his troops were close behind and killed many of them along the way. Abimelech stayed at Arumah, and Zebul forced Gaal and his brothers out of Shechem. The next morning, The people of Shechem were getting ready to work in their fields as usual, but someone told Abimelech about it. Abimelech divided his army into 3 groups and set up an ambush in the fields near Shechem. When the people came out of the town, he and his army rushed out from their hiding places and attacked. Abimelech and the troops with him ran to the town gate and took control of it, while 2 other groups attacked and killed the people who were in the fields. He and his troops fought in Shechem all day until they had killed everyone in town. Then he and his men tore down the houses and buildings and scattered salt everywhere. Earlier that day, the leaders of the temple of El-Berith at Shechem had heard about the attack. So they went into the temple fortress. But Abimelech found out where they were. He led his troops to Mount Zalmon, where he took an axe and chopped off a tree branch. He lifted the branch onto his shoulder and shouted,
"Hurry! Cut off a branch just as I did!"
When they all had branches, they followed Abimelech back to Shechem. They piled the branches against the fortress and set them on fire, burning down the fortress and killing about 1,000 men and women. After destroying Shechem, Abimelech went to Thebez. He surrounded the town and captured it. But there was a tall fortress in the middle of the town, and the town leaders and everyone else went inside. Then they barred the gates and went up to the flat roof. Abimelech and his army rushed to the fortress and tried to force their way inside. Abimelech himself was about to set the heavy wooden doors on fire when a woman on the roof dropped a large rock on his head and cracked his skull. The soldier who carried his weapons was nearby, and Abimelech told him,
"Take out your sword and kill me. I don't want people to say that I was killed by a woman."
So the soldier ran his sword through Abimelech. And when the Israelite soldiers saw that their leader was dead, they went back home. That's how God punished Abimelech for killing his brothers and bringing shame on his father's family. God also punished the people of Shechem for helping Abimelech. Everything happened just as Jotham's curse said it would.